And I remembered just the other day when I was talking about this, someone said, I would love for you to share how to do prairie points. Okay, prairie points, right? How many of you remember doing prairie points? It used to be really popular. We haven't seen it as much in recent years, although I do believe they're making a comeback. And prairie points, well, for those of you who might not be familiar with them, they're the little triangles that will go around the outside of a quilt and serve as the binding of the quilt. I remember 23 years ago when I gave birth to Jess that I was teaching school, and the room mom had made me a quilt, and I still have it to this day because I would never throw something like that away. And it was all the kids in the class created their own blocks, so they drew a picture on it, and then she had prairie points all the way around. Now this was much earlier, before I really had gotten into sewing. So I was just astounded at how someone would intricately take these little triangles, fold them up, and put them all around the quilt. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember doing it for the first time shortly thereafter when I started getting into quilting. And I was making a baby quilt for someone, and I thought, ooh, I want to remember, I want to do those prairie points because they were so cute. And I hated it. It was not very much fun because I was doing them one at a time, and I was just having the hardest time finagling those points and making sure they were all nice and exact. So what a few years later, what I had discovered was the technique of one-step prairie points. Have you ever done that? One-step prairie points, and it's done with a single strip of fabric, and that way your points are going to be so amazing. All right, so I thought, okay, I'll get my demo out and I'm going to show it to you, but it's a little hard to be able to explain with this kind of setup and just moving my laptop here and there. And so I decided I would go to no other place other than the club, my girlfriend's quilt shop, the club. That is a paid membership that we have each year, and where we have unlimited classes and videos and things and such like that on there. And I have a video just about one-step prairie points. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and show it to all of you so you get a little bit better idea of something that is in the club, as well as you're going to learn something new today or be reminded of if you've never done it before, or if you've done it before and you just need that little refresher. So I hope you'll enjoy the next few minutes as I take you inside the club and show you one strip prairie points. So I love the look of prairie points on the edges of a quilt to bind it. I think there is just something really charming about that look. And the traditional way of doing this is by taking squares like this and folding them from corner to corner, pressing it, and then over to the other corner, so in half again, and pressing it once more. Now, while these are really cute and it wasn't that difficult to make, as you can imagine, if you were doing an entire quilt of all these little squares and trying to line them up so perfectly, trying to have them evenly spaced, it would be quite the challenge, I'd say. So today I'm going to show you how to do the one strip prairie point, which is going to simplify the whole process of prairie points, and it's really a slick way to go. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is decide how large you want your prairie points to be from the bottom up to the top.
So if I wanted from down here up to here to end up being about approximately 2 inches, I would want to cut a 9-inch wide strip, and you'll see how that comes to play here in just a minute, but 9 inches is as much as I'll want to go. All right, so I'm going to cut a 9-inch strip. For purposes of this video, I just went ahead and cut a small strip. However, if you were doing it on an entire quilt, you would do several small strips and put them together as you go. But you'll see how that comes together here in just a minute. So I'm starting out with a 9-inch strip, and I'm going to fold it in half with wrong sides together, just like that. And then with your iron, you're going to press all the way down that strip, okay, so that you have a nice folded line to refer to. Okay, at this point, what you'll do is open it up once more. I'll go ahead and get rid of my little ironing station here so that I can use my cutting mat now. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do is bring it over to the very beginning of my cutting mat and take my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I want to cut little slits here from the edge towards the middle, and I'll stop right when I get to the center fold right here. And the width depends on how wide this is. So because this was 9 inches wide, I'm going to cut my strips every 4.5 inches. So I'll come here on my mat and measure at the 4.5 inch mark. And very carefully, I'll take my rotary cutter, and I'm going to take it really slow because all I want to do is go right up to that fold, as you can see right here, but not beyond the fold. All right, so I've done my first 4.5 inch cut. Now I'm going to go to the next one, which would take me to the number 9 on my mat. So again, I'm lining up my ruler, and very carefully I'm going to cut towards the fold. Another 4.5 inches is the 13.5 inch mark. Go that way, and I have one more to go. So where will the 13.5 take me? It'll take me to the 18-inch mark. Okay, now I want to point out something else to you. Now at this point, you're going to see that I don't have enough for another 4.5 inch strip. So I will go ahead and, let's see, I'm going to just line this up right here. Go to my 4.5 right here. And see how this is not quite 4.5 inches? So I'm going to go ahead and just take the rest of that off. Okay? Just like that. All right, now I'm going to switch this around, and I'll start again. And this time, my first cut is going to be just a little bit different. I'm going to go half of the 4.5 because I don't want to cut directly, right to that line. I want to offset my cuts. So half of 4.5 is 2 1/4. So I'll make this cut right here. And now you can see that I have this small piece here, and actually I'm going to remove that because I just want 4.5 inch cuts. All right, so I'm just going to cut that off, cut off that excess and put it aside. And now I'll go every 4.5 inches. So I'm just going to move my piece, my strip right over here, and go to the 4.5 inch mark. Make a cut there. Go to the 9. Notice again that these are now offset from right here. And I'll do it one more time. I'll now go to the 13.5. Again, noticing that there's this little tail that's extra, I'll go ahead and remove that at this time. Okay, so you'll continue doing this same method, but with all of your strips. And it's okay to do this in smaller strips. It's actually a little bit easier to work on smaller strips at a time. But then when it goes into the quilt, they'll just overlap one another. So are you ready to see how the magic happens? What you're going to do is take the top right-hand corner and bring it over towards the bottom left-hand corner. And you can go ahead and finger press that. You could also use your ironing board at this time as well, if you wanted to. And then I'll do the same thing with the top left-hand corner and bring it over to the bottom. All right, just like that. If you wanted to, you could also place a small pin in there just to hold it in place while you work on the next one. Okay, so I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna go right down to the bottom and left, going this way. And I'll place a pin in there as well. Do you see what's happening here? All of these squares are still connected, which is what makes this technique a lot of fun. And we'll do it one more time. All right, so now what do we do with these? Well, we're gonna do the same thing. This is where it gets really fun. We're gonna bring it over in that from the bottom right and over. And I'm gonna lift this up and pull this over. So fun. Can you believe it? I mean, talk about slick, right? Okay, gonna do the same thing here. Bring this over to one corner, again to the next corner. Undo this pin, lift up the flap, and pull over again. Just kind of tuck that in right there. And one more time. Over, over, finger press, pull out my pin, tuck it in, and there you go. Isn't this exciting? I get the biggest kick out of this when I see it all come together. Now, how simple was that? And now you know that they are perfectly evenly spaced and they all go together as one strip. So what you'll do now is take it over to the sewing machine and you'll just sew about 1/8 of an inch on the inside just to kind of hold it in place. Mostly it's a basting stitch. So at that point, you know, you basically will have all these strips done. So let's go over to the sewing machine and we'll sew all the way down. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine and you can see here that I have just basted this down. And now the question is, how do I put it into my quilt? So what you need to make sure to do first and foremost is that you want to make sure you're quilting, because if you've already had it quilted, you do not want it to go all the way to the edge. If by chance you had it quilted professionally and you forgot to tell them you're going to add Prairie Points and they quilted all the way to the edge, not a huge deal. What you need to do is just pull out a few stitches along the edges. And here you can see I've already started pinning. And I want you to pin back this by, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch. Okay, just enough that it's not going to get caught as you stitch this onto the front. So again, your back piece of fabric, you're going to pull to the back, place a few pins in there to make sure that it stays where it needs to be. And then you'll flip it over to the front And just like we do with normal binding, we're going to take this Prairie Point set strip and begin to sew. And so if you want a pin, you can do that, but you can just kind of hold it in place, and you're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down to sew the Prairie Points in place. So I'll go ahead and take it over to the sewing machine and do that, and then I'll show you what's next. All right, so I'm back from the sewing machine, and I sewed this 1/4 inch over on this side, and now all I have to do is flip this over. Is that so fun? Oh my goodness, I know I keep repeating myself with saying, is that so fun? But it really is. This is just such a great technique to try. If you've never done Prairie Points before, or even if you have and you've been afraid to ever do them again, I promise you, I think you might really enjoy doing the one step or the one strip Prairie Point, I should say. Okay, so you can see that I have folded this back on itself, and now notice I didn't get any of the backing caught, so I'll go ahead and remove those pins. Okay, and now what happens is that this back piece is going to come over top, and so that you can hand sew. But before we do that, I'm actually gonna just, let's see, I'm gonna pull this over, there we go. And you could press this if you wanted to by 1/4 inch over, but I'm not even gonna take time to do that. All I'm gonna do is place my pins in there. I'll just use my hands to fold this over. And you notice that I'm covering over that raw edge, that ugly edge. And you just keep doing that all the way down. So yeah, I mean, Prairie Points, it takes a little bit of extra effort, extra time, but oh my goodness, the results are just adorable, especially for like a baby quilt. I think there's nothing just cuter than having these little edges poking out. Okay, so you get the gist of what I'm doing here is I've pinned this, and now just like what we would do with normal binding, we would take a very thin needle and thread matching the same color as what we're stitching, and we would do our little blind stitch all the way down, making sure to catch the fold and the Prairie Point at the same time. So you will hand stitch the back and see that you've sewn the front, and it's just as adorable as ever. Have fun.
Okay. Oh, what do you think? What do you think? I hope that little tutorial helped. It really is a lot of fun. It's one of those techniques that I don't do, obviously, on every quilt, but there are certain quilts that absolutely call for it. Absolutely call for it.